Under the broad category of wisdom, the book of Proverbs discusses many different subjects. It deals with the pursuit of wisdom itself. It includes practical instruction for living. It discusses matters relating to personal growth, our dealings with others, and proper conduct in society. But also it deals with appropriate service to our Heavenly Father. These subjects are ones that are scattered throughout this book. But one of the things that we will notice in our study is various proverbs that are based upon specific subject matters. The book of Proverbs breaks down into four basic areas. First, we see the appeal of wisdom, and this is done in two ways. First, Solomon appeals to his son to heed the words of wisdom. He says in chapter 1 and verse 8, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching," verse 8. Second, wisdom is personified and makes an appeal for man to follow after her. In verse 20 of chapter 1, we read, "Wisdom shouts in the streets, and she lifts up her voice in the square." The second area we find is the appreciation of wisdom. Once we recognize the appeal of wisdom, this second part explains why we are to listen by telling us that we should appreciate wisdom. This is done by pointing out the benefits and the blessings that come when we follow after wisdom. "Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even pure gold, and my yield better than the choicest silver," chapter 8, verses 18 and 19. Then in the third area, we see the acquisition of wisdom. After hearing the appeal of wisdom and learning why we should appreciate wisdom, we see instructions and encouragement that will lead us to acquiring wisdom. We find these words in chapter 4 and verse 5. "Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth." The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom, and with all your acquiring, get understanding. The fourth area, we see the application of this wisdom. Simply acquiring wisdom is not the goal. Wisdom is something that must be put into practice. Solomon said, "Doing wickedness is like a sport to a fool, and so is wisdom to a man of understanding," chapter 10 and verse 23. A fool is not just one who lacks wisdom. A fool also practices wickedness, and in the same way, one who has understanding will apply his wisdom and will put it into practice. But how should we interpret the book of Proverbs? When we study the book of Proverbs, we need to understand that it contains general statements about life. It's not talking about absolute rewards, punishments, or consequences that exist in this life that come as a result of either wise or foolish living. But notice a couple of examples that we see here. "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it," chapter 22 and verse 6. This statement is generally true. However, we all know godly parents who did all they could in raising their children the right way, only to have their children forsake the Lord after they had grown. Every person has free will, and sadly some choose to forsake the good instruction they received from godly parents and follow a path which they should not follow. We also read in chapter 28 and verse 19, "He who tills his land will have plenty of food, but he who follows empty pursuits will have poverty in plenty." Again, this is a statement that is generally true. However, there are occasionally times of drought, sickness, injury, or other hardships that might prevent the diligent worker from enjoying the fruit of his labor. But as they pertain to this life, the rewards, punishments, and consequences mentioned in Proverbs are generally true. However, if we follow the wisdom that comes from above, the reward we have to look forward to is absolutely true. Solomon said the righteous have a refuge when they die in chapter 14 and verse 32, and that wisdom is a tree of life to those who take hold of it, chapter 3 and verse 18. In interpreting Proverbs, it is also important to remember that Solomon said, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." and fools despise wisdom and instruction. If we pursue divine wisdom in the fear of the Lord, respecting Him enough to trust Him and follow His instructions, then we will certainly profit from a study of the book of Proverbs. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and have a blessed day.